Have you ever experienced an itch that just wouldn't go away? Maybe it's in an unexpected spot, under your arms, around your private areas, or even on your lower legs. For many older adults, these persistent itches are more than just a minor annoyance. They can be warning signs that something more serious is happening inside the body. As we age, our skin changes, but sometimes these changes come with health risks that shouldn't be ignored. In today's video, we're going to explore 3 specific itchy areas that, when persistent, could indicate underlying health issues that might even affect your lifespan. It's important to understand these signs early so you or your loved ones can take action before problems worsen. We'll look at real examples and explain how conditions like diabetes, certain cancers, and thyroid problems can cause these bothersome symptoms. Knowing what to watch for can make all the difference in staying healthy and living longer. So, whether you've noticed these itches yourself or want to be prepared to help someone you care about, stay with us as we dive into these vital health clues that every senior should know. If you are not subscribed, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. As we get older, most of us expect a few aches and pains here and there. A stiff knee, a sore back, the occasional headache. But rarely do we stop and wonder about the little irritations, like an itch that just doesn't go away. It's easy to chalk it up to dry skin or maybe an allergy, and for a while, that's what most people do. We grab a bottle of lotion from the drugstore, dab on some ointment, and hope for the best. Sometimes, though, these everyday annoyances are the body's way of waving a red flag, quietly warning us that something deeper is going on beneath the surface. Let me tell you about Mrs. Jenkins, a woman I met not too long ago. She was 68, bright-eyed and lively, the kind of neighbor who baked pies for the church picnic and always remembered birthdays. For months, she had been dealing with an odd, relentless itch under her arms and along her lower legs. At first, she brushed it off, blaming the change in seasons or maybe a new laundry detergent. But when the itching grew worse, especially at night, it began to wear her down. She found herself waking up, scratching at her skin in frustration, unable to get a good night's rest. Her energy started slipping away, and with it, her cheerful spirit. After a particularly rough week, Mrs. Jenkins made an appointment with her doctor. She was surprised when her doctor didn't just hand her a prescription for a stronger cream. Instead, the doctor listened carefully, asked about other symptoms, and ordered a series of tests. What they discovered changed everything. Mrs. Jenkins wasn't just dealing with dry skin, she had early-stage diabetes. The itching was one of her body's first signals that something was off with her blood sugar, and because she caught it early, she was able to make changes to her diet and lifestyle that made a real difference in her long-term health. Stories like Mrs. Jenkins's are more common than you might think. Persistent itching in certain areas of the body can be an early symptom of several serious conditions, especially in older adults. Most of us grew up thinking that longevity, living to a ripe old age, was mostly a matter of genetics. My granddad lived to 92, we say with pride, so I'll probably do the same. And while genetics does play a role, modern research tells a different story. It's our daily habits, choices, and how closely we listen to our bodies that matter most. Small warning signs, like unexplained itching, can sometimes tell us more about our health than a family tree ever could. The science behind this is fascinating. Our skin is the largest organ in our body and acts as an early warning system, picking up on changes that we might otherwise miss. For instance, persistent itching in the armpits can point to problems with blood sugar regulation, a common issue for seniors. Diabetes doesn't always announce itself with dramatic symptoms. Instead, it often begins quietly, with subtle clues like dry, itchy skin. High blood sugar affects nerve endings and skin moisture, making itching a surprisingly common first sign. Then there's the story of Mr. Harris, a retired teacher who started noticing a persistent itch around his anus. At first, he was embarrassed to talk about it, even with his wife. But as weeks turned into months and the itching grew more severe, he decided to seek help. It turned out that he had developed hemorrhoids, something he'd never dealt with before, and with the right care, his symptoms improved. But in some cases, persistent anal itching can be a warning sign of more serious conditions like rectal cancer or anal fissures. These aren't easy conversations to have, but they're vital for early diagnosis and better outcomes. And let's not forget about the lower legs. Persistent itching in this area is often dismissed as a sign of aging or dry winter air. But for some, it's a signal of thyroid problems, specifically hypothyroidism. When the thyroid slows down, it affects skin moisture, making the lower legs feel dry, scaly, and itchy. If left unchecked, hypothyroidism can lead to a whole cascade of health issues, including fatigue, weight gain, and depression. What connects all these stories is a simple but powerful truth. Paying attention to small changes can have a big impact on our lives. Our bodies are always trying to communicate with us, and sometimes the messages are subtle. A lingering itch isn't always just dry skin. It could be the first sign that something important needs our attention. It's also a reminder that what we do every day, how we eat, how we move, how we care for our skin, matters far more than the genes we inherited. Mrs. Jenkins made simple changes to her diet and began walking every day, and her blood sugar levels improved dramatically. Mr. Harris, after a little embarrassment, learned that talking to his doctor could spare him months of discomfort, and potentially much worse down the line. For both of them, recognizing those first quiet warnings was the key to taking back control of their health and enjoying more good years. So, the next time you notice something unusual, don't ignore it or brush it aside. Listen to your body, talk to your doctor, and remember that growing older doesn't mean you have to accept every new ache, pain, or itch as inevitable. With awareness, action, and the right habits, there's every reason to look forward to many vibrant, healthy years ahead. Mrs. Jung had always been a picture of quiet strength. At 60 years old, she still tended her small backyard garden every morning, waving at neighbors as she pulled the stubborn weeds and checked on her blooming roses. Her life was simple, but she cherished every moment. Her evening walks, church on Sundays, and dinners with her children whenever they visited. But last September, something began to trouble her in a way she couldn't quite ignore. It started with a mild itch beneath her skin, just above her waistline. At first, she brushed it off, assuming it was the weather turning cooler, or maybe a reaction to a new detergent. "It's nothing," she told herself, rubbing lotion on the spot before bed and moving on with her day. But the itching didn't stop. As the months went by and autumn deepened into winter, it grew worse. No matter what she tried, creams, ointments, even oatmeal baths, nothing brought real relief. The itching spread from her waist to her arms and legs, sometimes so intense at night that she'd wake up scratching, her sleep broken and restless. Soon, other changes crept in. Mrs. Jung, always careful about her health, began to notice that her clothes felt looser. She was losing weight, despite eating as usual. She felt more tired than before, and sometimes she woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding with a vague sense of dread. Still, she hesitated to make a fuss. After all, she didn't want to bother anyone, least of all her grown children who had busy lives of their own. But as the new year approached, the itching became unbearable. One cold evening, after a night spent awake and restless, she realized it was time to see her doctor. The visit was long overdue, and her doctor listened carefully as Mrs. Jung described her symptoms. The persistent, unexplained itching, the weight loss, the night sweats, and the tiredness she couldn't shake. He didn't dismiss her concerns or reach for a bottle of skin cream. Instead, he ordered a series of blood tests and scans, wanting to get to the bottom of what was happening. A few days later, the phone call came. Mrs. Jung sat quietly at her kitchen table as her doctor explained the results. The news was unexpected and frightening. She had lymphoma, a cancer of the lymphatic system. At first, she could hardly believe it. "Cancer," she repeated softly, trying to understand how a simple itch could mean something so serious. But her doctor explained that this type of cancer can sometimes reveal itself in subtle ways, itchy skin being one of them. Lymphoma is a cancer that begins in the lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell that's essential for fighting infection and keeping the immune system strong. These lymphocytes are scattered throughout the body in the lymph nodes, spleen, and other tissues, making lymphoma a disease that can arise almost anywhere. When lymphoma develops, the cancerous cells start to produce certain substances, like histamine, that get released into the bloodstream. As these substances circulate, they irritate the nerve endings in the skin, triggering an intense, persistent itch that doesn't respond to ordinary treatments. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Research shows that about 20% of people with lymphoma experience some form of skin itching before any other symptoms appear. It isn't just the kind of mild itch you can ignore, either. The itching comes on suddenly and seems to have no obvious cause. It doesn't look like eczema, hives, or a rash. Often, the skin looks completely normal. But the sensation is relentless, stubborn, and unlike any ordinary irritation. Worse, no over-the-counter lotion or medication seems to help. And that's what makes it so easy to miss. Most folks, like Mrs. Young, assume it's just a skin problem or an allergic reaction, never suspecting something much deeper. But lymphoma rarely stops at just itching. Other symptoms may follow, like swollen lymph nodes that don't go away, low-grade fevers, unexplained pain, and, as Mrs. Young experienced, a noticeable and unexplained weight loss. Some people also struggle with persistent fatigue, night sweats, or even anemia. Any one of these signs on their own might not be enough to raise alarm bells, but together, they tell a story that deserves immediate attention. That's why recognizing these subtle, early signs, and taking them seriously, is so important, especially as we age. Cancer caught early is always easier to treat, and the odds of recovery improve dramatically. For Mrs. Young, her decision to visit the doctor, even after months of waiting, probably made all the difference. She started treatment with a care team who understood the urgency of her case, and while her journey was not easy, she faced it with hope, gratitude, and a renewed sense of connection to her loved ones. Her story is a gentle reminder to all of us. Sometimes, what seems like a small problem is a whisper from our bodies to pay attention. A persistent itch isn't always just dry skin. If it refuses to go away, especially when paired with other symptoms, don't brush it off. Reach out, talk to your doctor, and trust your instincts. Our health and our future are worth that extra care. Itchy spots and their possible causes. 1. Armpit itching related to diabetes. It was the middle of January when Helen first started to notice the persistent itching under her arms. She just celebrated her 70th birthday with her family, a day filled with laughter, grandkids running circles around her recliner, and the sweet taste of homemade chocolate cake. The holidays had come and gone, and as the new year began, Helen looked forward to her usual routines. Her early morning crossword puzzle, afternoon walks around the block, and her weekly church quilting group. She had always been healthy for her age, and though she'd slowed down a bit, Helen prided herself on staying active and independent. But this itch, this stubborn, nagging itch, simply wouldn't let go. At first, she blamed it on the thick winter sweaters her daughter had bought her for Christmas. Maybe it was the new laundry detergent, she thought, or perhaps she wasn't rinsing well enough in the shower. Helen tried changing soaps and lotions, even resorting to baby powder in hopes of some relief. Yet, each night as she changed into her pajamas, the irritation returned. It wasn't just bothersome, it was distracting, making her fidgety during church and waking her in the middle of the night. Sometimes, the skin under her arms felt so dry and papery, it was all she could do not to scratch herself raw. As the days passed, Helen started to notice a few other changes that gave her pause. She found herself thirstier than usual, sipping water constantly even though she wasn't exerting herself much. Her mouth was dry, and she had to get up several times a night just to use the bathroom. At first, she shrugged these things off as just part of getting old. After all, she'd always heard that aging came with all sorts of new aches, pains, and inconveniences. But this persistent itching, paired with the other little signs, made her uneasy. Helen confided in her best friend Marjorie over coffee one afternoon. Marjorie listened, a furrow of concern knitting her brow, and told Helen about her own husband's experience. "You know, when Frank started having those same symptoms, it turned out to be diabetes," she said gently. "Why don't you just get checked out, for peace of mind?" Encouraged by her friend's concern, Helen scheduled a visit with her doctor. Sitting in the exam room, she explained the itching, the dryness, the thirst, and the frequent urination. Her doctor listened carefully, nodding as Helen spoke, and then ordered some blood work. "It's probably nothing serious, Helen, but let's rule out a few things," her doctor reassured her. The next week, Helen got a call from the clinic. Her blood sugar was high, much higher than normal. Her doctor explained that Helen had developed type 2 diabetes, a condition that affects how the body manages blood sugar. The news was a shock, and Helen sat quietly in her kitchen after the call, thinking about how something as seemingly minor as an itch had led to a diagnosis that would change the way she looked at her health. Her doctor explained that diabetes can cause all sorts of skin changes, especially for older adults. High blood sugar affects the nerves and the skin's ability to hold moisture. The armpits, in particular, are vulnerable because the skin is thin, there's plenty of friction for movement, and sweat glands can become less effective as we age. For some, like Helen, the combination of reduced sweat, drier skin, and higher blood sugar levels creates the perfect storm for itching. An itch that doesn't respond to creams or powders, an itch that's not caused by a rash but by what's happening deep inside the body. Helen's story is more common than you might think. For older Americans, diabetes is often called a silent disease because its symptoms can be so subtle: dry skin, an odd itch, or even just feeling tired. Too often, these signs are written off as normal parts of getting older, when in fact, they're early warnings from a body that needs help. Once Helen understood what was happening, she set out to make changes. With guidance from her healthcare team, she adjusted her diet, focusing on whole grains, fresh vegetables, and lean protein instead of the cakes and cookies she loved to bake. She made a point to walk every afternoon, rain or shine, and learned how to check her blood sugar at home. As her numbers improved, the itching faded, and Helen found herself sleeping better and feeling more like her old self. More importantly, she realized that her body had been speaking to her all along, asking her to pay attention to the little things. Now, when Helen talks to her friends at quilting group or church, she encourages them not to ignore the small changes. The strange itch, the unexplained thirst, the tiredness that lingers longer than it should. If your body is trying to tell you something, she tells them, don't brush it off. Sometimes it's more than just dry skin. It could be a sign that you need to check on your health. Helen's willingness to listen to her body's signals allowed her to catch diabetes early and make positive changes, turning what started as a nagging itch into a new commitment to her well-being. 2. Anal itching and related health issues. For most of his life, Harold never gave much thought to the small discomforts that came and went. After all, he'd lived through harder times: World War II rations, raising 3 kids on a modest salary, and the loss of his beloved wife to cancer. Now at 74, Harold took pride in his independence, tending his vegetable garden and keeping up with the morning crossword. But over the past several months, a new problem had crept into his life, an itch he could not shake, right around his backside. At first, Harold chalked it up to something simple. Maybe it was the new brand of toilet paper or the spicy chili his daughter made for Sunday dinners. He tried to ignore it, thinking it would go away on its own. But the itch was persistent, lurking throughout the day and growing more intense at night. Sometimes it was just a mild annoyance, but other times it kept him awake, tossing and turning as he tried not to scratch. The discomfort was private, almost embarrassing to mention, so he kept it to himself for weeks. When Harold finally worked up the courage to tell his doctor, he did so quietly, almost apologetically. "Doc, I've got this itching. Back there. It just won't quit." The doctor listened without judgment, gently asking questions about his hygiene, diet, and any other symptoms. Harold mentioned that he sometimes saw small drops of blood on the toilet paper and felt a bit more tired lately. The doctor nodded and explained that anal itching, though often a minor issue, can sometimes be a sign of underlying health concerns, especially in older adults. For many seniors, persistent anal itching is more than a nuisance. Sometimes it's simply the result of irritation, harsh toilet paper, not cleaning well after a bowel movement, or using heavily scented hygiene products. But for Harold and many others, it can signal something more. The doctor explained that conditions like hemorrhoids, swollen veins in the rectum, are common with age and can cause both itching and occasional bleeding. Sitting too long or straining during bowel movements can make them worse. Other possible causes are even more serious. Anal fissures, small tears in the lining of the anus, can lead to sharp pain and persistent itching, especially after passing a hard stool. For some, especially those who notice other symptoms like blood, unexplained weight loss, or significant changes in bowel habits, the concern grows deeper. Rectal or anal cancers, though rare, often start with subtle symptoms like itching, bleeding, or a change in the feeling of fullness. The key is not to ignore these warning signs, especially if they stick around for more than a couple of weeks. In Harold's case, a careful examination revealed that he did have hemorrhoids, likely made worse by years of sitting for long stretches while reading and a diet that hadn't seen enough fiber in years. With his doctor's guidance, Harold made some small but important changes. He started eating oatmeal for breakfast, added more leafy greens to his dinner plate, and drank more water throughout the day. He learned gentle cleaning habits, switched to unscented wipes, and even started taking short walks around the block after meals. Within a few weeks, the itching eased, and he felt more like himself again. But his story also served as a wake-up call to others in his senior circle. When Harold shared his experience at his local VFW post, a few of the other men nodded knowingly, admitting they'd struggled with similar symptoms but never mentioned them. One friend confessed he'd been afraid it might mean cancer, but was too embarrassed to see a doctor. Harold encouraged them all, saying, "It's not something you have to put up with, and it's not something to hide from your doctor. Sometimes the littlest changes make the biggest difference." The emotional toll of persistent anal itching isn't talked about enough. It can lead to anxiety, restless nights, and even feelings of shame or isolation. For some, the fear of a serious illness like cancer adds a heavy burden. That's why it's so important for seniors, and those who care for them, to know that these symptoms are common, but they're not something to ignore. If the itching is persistent, worsening, or comes with other worrying signs like bleeding, pain, or unexplained fatigue, it's time to see a doctor. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Harold learned that addressing the problem head-on made all the difference. Not only did he find relief, but he also took control of his health in a new way. His willingness to talk openly about a private issue helped his friends and neighbors understand that paying attention to our bodies, no matter how awkward the symptom, can lead to better health and greater peace of mind in our golden years. So if you or someone you love is dealing with an itch that just won't quit, remember Harold's story. Don't brush it off, and don't be embarrassed to speak up. Sometimes, the most uncomfortable subjects are the ones that need our attention most. 3. Genital area itching and gynecological conditions. Throughout her life, Margaret prided herself on being practical, resilient, and open-minded. Now in her late 60s, she managed her arthritis with gentle yoga, swapped recipes with her friends at church, and always stayed up to date on her medical checkups. But even with her careful attention to health, she found herself facing a problem she didn't quite know how to talk about, an unrelenting itch in her genital area. It began one spring as a mild, occasional irritation, something she noticed mostly at night. At first, Margaret figured it was due to the change in weather or perhaps a new brand of laundry detergent. She bought hypoallergenic soap, switched to cotton underwear, and tried every over-the-counter cream the pharmacist recommended. But the itch didn't fade. If anything, it grew worse, accompanied now by redness, a burning sensation, and sometimes swelling that made her feel uncomfortable throughout the day. Margaret hesitated to mention it to anyone, even her closest friends. These weren't the sort of things she was used to discussing over morning coffee. The discomfort, though, grew impossible to ignore. Even sitting for long periods became unpleasant, and the irritation interfered with her sleep. As the days dragged on, Margaret felt increasingly anxious, worried that there might be something seriously wrong. One afternoon, after another restless night, she decided to make an appointment with her gynecologist. "I almost canceled twice," Margaret would later admit, "because I was embarrassed. But I'm glad I went." Her doctor listened carefully as Margaret described her symptoms, asking about her hygiene habits, any new products, and whether she'd noticed changes in discharge, odor, or pain during urination. The questions were thorough, and for the first time, Margaret felt less alone in her experience. After an exam and some simple tests, the doctor explained that her symptoms were caused by vulvitis, an inflammation of the external genital area, often triggered by an imbalance in the vaginal flora. In Margaret's case, her natural protective bacteria had been disrupted, likely from a combination of aging, changes in hormone levels after menopause, and using harsh soaps. The doctor reassured her that vulvitis was common, especially in women her age, and with proper care and a short course of medication, the discomfort would improve. But that wasn't all the doctor discussed. She explained that genital area itching can stem from a wide range of gynecological conditions in older women, not just vulvitis. For some, persistent itching could be a sign of vaginitis, an inflammation of the vaginal lining that can come from yeast infections, bacterial overgrowth, or even low estrogen levels. Others might experience eczema or psoriasis, chronic skin conditions that can affect sensitive areas and lead to flares of intense itching and redness. There are also less common but serious causes, such as genital warts, caused by HPV, or scabies, a tiny parasitic infestation that can target the genital region. Margaret's doctor emphasized the importance of not ignoring persistent genital itching, especially when it's accompanied by other symptoms like swelling, burning, unusual discharge, or pain during urination. Sometimes, itching might even signal a precancerous or cancerous condition, such as vulvar cancer, which most often affects postmenopausal women. Early diagnosis in these cases can make a life-saving difference. With her new prescription and a plan for gentle self-care, like using fragrance-free soap, wearing loose cotton clothing, and avoiding potential irritants, Margaret's symptoms began to improve within weeks. She felt relieved, but she also felt empowered to talk more openly about her experience with other women in her life. At her next church group meeting, she gently shared her story, discovering she wasn't alone. Several friends admitted they dealt with similar symptoms but felt too embarrassed to seek help. This new openness was liberating for Margaret and her friends. They began to realize that health issues, even the most personal ones, were nothing to be ashamed of, especially as they grew older and their bodies changed in unexpected ways. The message became clear: it's vital to pay attention to your body and speak up about new symptoms, no matter how uncomfortable or private they may feel. Margaret now encourages other women to be proactive about their health. If something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it and don't just hope it'll go away. See your doctor. Take care of yourself the way you'd want your daughter or granddaughter to. Her experience is a reminder that, as we age, the body sends subtle messages. Sometimes, an itch is just a passing nuisance. But sometimes, it's a gentle nudge to pay closer attention and seek the care that every woman deserves. For most of his adult life, Robert never gave much thought to the little changes in his body. Now in his 70s, he'd gotten used to a few new aches and pains, and figured dry skin was just another part of growing older. But one winter, he began noticing something different, an itch on his lower legs that wouldn't leave him alone. It started subtly, with a little dryness and irritation near his shins after his morning shower. Robert brushed it off, thinking the cold, dry air outside and the indoor heating inside must be to blame. He bought a big bottle of lotion and started using it twice a day, hoping it would help. For a while, the itch faded. But as the weeks rolled by, the discomfort grew more intense. No matter how much cream he slathered on, his lower legs stayed dry, almost scaly to the touch, and the itching became so distracting it would keep him up at night. Sometimes he even noticed a strange tingling sensation, like pins and needles, dancing along his calves. At first, Robert kept it to himself. He didn't want to seem like a complainer, especially when his wife, Linda, was busy looking after their grandchildren. But after several sleepless nights and more than a few mornings spent scratching at his shins, he finally brought it up at his annual checkup. His doctor listened carefully, asking about his energy levels, any changes in his weight, and whether he'd felt colder than usual. Robert admitted he had. His feet always seemed icy, even with wool socks, and he'd felt more tired lately, but he chalked it up to winter blues. His doctor ran a few tests, including a thyroid function panel, and called him a few days later with the results. Robert was surprised to learn that he had hypothyroidism, a condition where the thyroid gland doesn't produce enough hormones to keep the body's systems running smoothly. The doctor explained that this hormonal imbalance can affect nearly every part of the body, including the skin. When the thyroid is underactive, the skin loses its ability to retain moisture, becoming dry, rough, and more prone to itching, especially on the lower legs, where there are fewer oil glands to keep the skin supple. Robert was shocked that a sluggish thyroid could have such a noticeable effect on his skin, but the more he listened, the more the pieces began to fit together. Not only had he felt itchy and dry on his legs, but he'd also been more forgetful than usual and had gained a few extra pounds despite eating the same meals. He'd even noticed his skin looking paler and colder than before. The doctor described some of the unique characteristics of itching caused by hypothyroidism. Unlike the occasional itch that comes from dry winter weather, hypothyroid itching is persistent, stubborn, and often doesn't respond to lotions or moisturizers alone. The skin may feel rough, scaly, or even tight, and the sensation can be accompanied by tingling, numbness, or coldness in the area. Sometimes, the itching is worse at night, making it hard to get a restful sleep, and it can even cause the skin to crack or bleed if scratched too much. For Robert, understanding the root cause of his symptoms brought a sense of relief. His doctor prescribed thyroid medication to help balance his hormones and recommended a few changes to his daily routine. Robert learned to take shorter, lukewarm showers instead of hot ones, to pat his skin dry gently, and to use fragrance-free creams right after bathing to lock in moisture. He also began drinking more water and eating foods rich in vitamins and minerals to help support his skin health. Within a few months of starting treatment, Robert noticed real improvements. The itching faded, his skin looked healthier, and he began to feel more energetic and alert. Even better, he slept through the night without tossing and turning. The whole experience was a powerful lesson in how seemingly minor symptoms can be the body's way of sounding the alarm about something deeper. Now, Robert makes a point of sharing his story at his weekly coffee group, especially with friends who think just dry skin is something to ignore. He reminds them that, as we age, changes in our bodies, no matter how small, are worth paying attention to. Don't be afraid to ask your doctor about it, he says. Sometimes, an itch is more than just an itch. It could be the first sign that your body needs help. Robert's experience shows that listening to our bodies and seeking help when something doesn't feel right is one of the best ways to stay healthy and comfortable in our golden years. After all, growing older isn't about ignoring the signs. It's about responding to them with care, curiosity, and a willingness to take action. After years of helping her grandchildren with their homework and volunteering at the local library, Linda was no stranger to a good mystery. But when she developed a stubborn itch on her arms and legs that just wouldn't quit, she found herself facing a puzzle that left her stumped. She tried every home remedy she could think of: aloe gel, oatmeal baths, even the old trick of putting socks on her hands to keep from scratching at night. Still, the irritation lingered, making her restless and uneasy. When she finally visited her dermatologist, Dr. Wong, she expected to hear the same old advice about using more lotion or changing her soap. Instead, Dr. Wong sat down with her, listened carefully, and began to explain that not all itching is created equal. He described two main types that commonly trouble older adults: dry itching and damp itching. Dry itching, Dr. Wong explained, is the type Linda was most likely dealing with. As we age, our skin naturally loses moisture. The sweat and oil glands that kept our skin soft and supple in our younger years start to slow down. In the fall and winter, when the air turns crisp and the heat is running indoors, the dryness only gets worse. This leads to skin that feels rough, flaky, and tight, especially on the arms, legs, and back. Dry itching rarely comes with a rash or visible redness at first. It's a deep, persistent sensation that scratching can't quite relieve. It often feels worse after bathing or in cold, dry weather. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. But Dr. Wong pointed out that there's another kind of itch, one he called damp itching. Unlike dry itching, which is mostly about a lack of moisture, damp itching usually points to something going on inside the body. This type of itch is often linked to health conditions like problems with the liver or kidneys, high blood sugar, or even infections. Skin affected by damp itching may look darker, feel swollen, or appear rough. Sometimes, scratching leads to small bumps, sores, or even infections if harmful bacteria get in. Damp itching is especially common in places where skin stays moist, like under the arms or around the groin and anus. Linda listened as Dr. Wong described how important it is to figure out which type of itch you're dealing with, because each one requires a different approach. For dry itching, the best solutions are gentle, moisturizing lotions, shorter showers, and soft clothing. For damp itching, though, it's crucial to look for underlying health problems and get those treated first. Linda left Dr. Wong's office feeling relieved. She finally understood why no amount of lotion had solved her problem, and she knew she wasn't alone. Like many seniors, her skin was just trying to tell her something. With a new routine of gentle skincare and a little extra attention to her health, Linda found her way back to comfort. And now, when her friends mention a nagging itch, she encourages them to listen carefully, because sometimes our bodies are simply asking us to look a little deeper. After she visited it with Dr. Wong, Linda realized that preventing that relentless dry itching wasn't just about applying lotion. It required a whole new approach to self-care. She started by making small changes in her daily routine, determined to give her skin the comfort it deserved. One of the first lessons Linda learned was the importance of hydrating her skin from the inside out. She began carrying a water bottle wherever she went, making sure to sip throughout the day, even when she wasn't particularly thirsty. It amazed her how such a simple habit could make her skin feel less tight and more comfortable, especially during those dry winter months. At mealtimes, Linda started paying closer attention to her diet. Instead of reaching for salty snacks and sugary treats, she added more vegetables and fruits to her plate, especially those rich in vitamins A and E, like carrots and sweet potatoes. She even tried new recipes with leafy greens and mushrooms, all of which supported her skin's health. Occasionally, she'd prepare lean proteins like fish or a small portion of liver, following Dr. Wong's advice that a balanced diet could help maintain the skin's natural barrier. Linda also learned that lifestyle changes could make a real difference. She stopped taking long hot showers, which only dried out her skin more, and switched to gentle, fragrance-free cleansers. After every bath or shower, she'd pat her skin dry with a soft towel and apply a thick moisturizer while her skin was still damp to lock in moisture. In the evenings, she'd slip into cotton pajamas, grateful for the way the natural fibers soothed her skin instead of irritating it like synthetic fabrics often did. But perhaps the most surprising change was how much avoiding irritants helped. Linda became mindful of the cleaning products she used at home, choosing mild, hypoallergenic detergents for her laundry and avoiding harsh chemicals in her kitchen and bathroom. She made a habit of wearing gloves when cleaning or gardening, protecting her hands from soaps and dirt that might dry them out. When Friendin at her church group mentioned struggling with itchy skin, Linda shared her newfound knowledge. "Don't wait until it gets bad," she'd say with a smile. "Drink your water, eat your veggies, keep your showers short, and don't forget your moisturizer." These simple changes, she found, made her skin feel softer, her days more comfortable, and her nights much more restful. As the seasons changed and the air grew cold again, Linda faced winter with a new sense of confidence. She knew that prevention, hydration, diet, gentle care, and avoiding irritants was the key to keeping her skin healthy and itch-free. And by taking these small steps every day, she found that not only did her skin thank her, but her whole body felt better, too. Looking back over the past few months, Linda realized how much she had learned simply by paying closer attention to the small changes in her body. What began as an itch here or there, just a minor annoyance at first, turned into a journey of self-discovery and health awareness she hadn't expected. By taking those little signs seriously, whether it was a persistent itch, unexplained fatigue, or skin that just didn't feel like it used to, she opened the door to important conversations with her doctor and her friends. In the end, these moments brought her more comfort and confidence than she could have imagined. She noticed she wasn't alone, either. At church, at the local grocery store, or even during family dinners, she found others willing to share their own stories. They talked about dry winters and long, restless nights, and the simple joys of finding relief and peace again. Some mentioned how small lifestyle changes made a world of difference. Drinking more water, switching to gentler soaps, or just listening more closely to what their bodies were saying. For Linda, there was a quiet pride in knowing she'd helped others by speaking up, encouraging them to care for themselves a little more each day. As she walked her little dog through the neighborhood, breathing in the crisp air and feeling the soft warmth of her gloves, Linda felt a sense of gratitude. She was thankful not just for healthy skin, but for the chance to keep learning and connecting. If her story or any of these tips have resonated with you, she hopes you'll take a moment to reflect on your journey and share your thoughts below. And if you found this story helpful, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more stories and tips to help you live your healthiest, happiest life.